Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. Dante's Divine Comedy is considered one of the great works of European literature. Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels is one of many entries into great adventure fiction. George Orwell's Animal Farm is a chilling study in humanity's capacity to do evil in the name of good, cleverly disguised as a parable about barnyard animals. However, each one of these things was also a political polemic. Orwell was analyzing the rise of the Bolsheviks in Russia. Swift and Alighieri were examining the political situations of their countries, England and Italy, respectively. In Animal Farm, the rhetoric the pigs adopt is, in many ways, directly taken from the rhetoric of the Communist Party of Russia during the revolution and in the aftermath of it. Swift presents us with 4 different wild and wondrous worlds to explore, the first of which satirizes the political atmosphere of his home country. The afterlife that Dante proceeds through in the Divine Comedy is riddled with faces that would be familiar to anyone embroiled in the Italian politics of his time period, and the parts of the afterlife they are in give very pointed commentary on what Dante thought of those particular people. And yet, people with no understanding of the October Revolution, or English politics in the 1700s, or Italian politics of the 14th century can still read and enjoy these works. It is a tribute to the artistic ability and vision of these men that these books still ring true after all the political ideas that inspired them have faded into obscurity. In the modern day, it is a commonly accepted nostrum that political art is doomed to failure. It is too much of the moment to have the right kind of foundation to create enduring artworks, particularly as regards storytelling. Yet in these 3 stories, we see the opposite being true. Each of these works was inspired by the moment, but they remain so well executed, so incisive in human nature, so philosophically thoughtful, and so memorable in the language and images used that people still discuss them today. One of the best kept secrets of storytelling is that a well-executed story has an integrity all of its own. And while the political fancies of the moment will eventually pass away and be forgotten, if the integrity of the story itself is strong enough, it won't matter. The vision, the ideas, and the reflections on human nature will continue to be true because those things are timeless, and the momentary political concerns that may have inspired the story initially are incidental to the artistic merit of the story. They are not integral to it. The secret of taking these ever-changing political concerns and turning them into a story is not to make the political concerns the foundation of the story. Rather, the story must be a lens that focuses the political concerns into something that illuminates a deeper lesson about human nature. And that, at last, brings us to the topic I wanted to discuss today, which is Adolescence. The British show on Netflix, not the more abstract period of human development. Lots of people have thoughts about this show. Very few of those thoughts have to do with the story, the way it is told, the artistic merits of the writing, performances, and cinematography that brings us the story. That would be deep and meaningful insight into the tale. What we have gotten instead is a discussion of politics. The story revolves around a young boy who brings a knife to school and stabs someone to death. That is a terrible tragedy. The story revolves around the investigation of the murder and why it was committed. And we follow the devastation of the young boy's family as they begin to realize how they have failed and in many ways are failing their son. The reality that the story presents, whether it realizes it or not, is that children are thrown virtually unsupervised into a giant pool of their peers where they are viciously cruel to one another. Now, in the modern era, that is not just their school, it's the internet. And as the number of toxic influences on people builds, they are more and more likely to do something disastrous to themselves or to someone else, or most likely, both. For a very long time, parents have been complacent, believing that a handful of hours with them at home after the school day and some brief glances of attention from a teacher in a public school system will be enough to counteract the toxic influences in their lives. And it simply isn't. And we are seeing more and more violence breaking out everywhere in the world because of this reality. The particular emphasis on Eddie, the father of the boy, is merited because ultimately the father is most responsible for the outcome of his family. The grief and guilt that Eddie feels throughout this story is tangible and powerful. It is a warning to parents, both mothers and fathers, that if you do not take the time to care for your children, to understand who is influencing them and how they are being influenced, both at school and more on the internet, then one day you will turn around and find that your child is not someone you know anymore. They have been corrupted and transformed by the worst aspects of society. This reality has always been true. Yes, the internet is new. Yes, public schools are new. But since the book of Proverbs, at the very least, we have known that bad company corrupts good character. Eddie abandoned his son to bad company. Now he must pay the price. That is the story that Adolescence tells. But it is derived from the politics of the moment. Many political commentators have made a lot of hay over the many obvious political trends that go into this story. Its analysis of the internet is rather cringy. Jamie, the boy at the center of the story, is called an incel by schoolmates. He talks about Andrew Tate. He gets coded messages in emojis. It's all very 2025, and if you don't cringe, it means you've probably not used the internet very much. But the reality is, in 10 years, in 20 years, that's not going to mean anything. That is a passing fad. And people in the future will just look at it and say, well, that must have meant something at the time. But they won't think about it very much, because they'll be too busy watching this family's life slowly fall apart, because the parents neglected their children. A lot of hay has been made over the fact that many of the actual attacks on students at schools have been conducted not by English people, but by immigrants. And yes, that is true in the moment. But there has always been violence at schools. And this is an English story. So they have chosen to make the person at the center of the story English, not an immigrant. That is an artistic choice that keeps the focus on the failure of the parents, and particularly the father, who is the head of the household, to watch over their family. The purpose of the story is not to focus on the political moment. It is not to tell a story about immigration. It is to tell a story about the consequences of neglecting your family. In order to keep the focus on that, the political situation of the moment, all the complications that have come about as a result of poor immigration policy have to be set aside. You have to tell an English story about English people in England to keep the focus on the point. The point of the story is neglecting your family will destroy your family. Immigration comes and goes, but families that are neglected by their fathers will always collapse. That is the difference between the political moment and the artistic goal of the story. The story is being marketed as a tale about radicalization, about how people fall down rabbit holes. about misogyny and violence towards women. These are concerns of the political moment. And perhaps more than anything else, they are damaging to the story in and of itself. Now, I'm not very tuned into British politics, but I have heard some reports that people are even talking about making this a part of some kind of educational program. And nothing has been worse for great works of art than to make them part of mandatory education. So I don't really support that. But ultimately, these two are momentary political concerns. If the art is good enough, it will endure past these momentary concerns. And hopefully, at some point, it will be viewed on its own for what it is. A tragedy about the outcomes, not of misogyny or radicalization, but of neglect. Because whether they realize it or not, the creators of this show have told a tale of neglect, of parents who had no idea what was actually happening to their children until it was far, far too late. That's not a new situation by any stretch of the imagination, but it is in the timelessness of it that this particular piece will rise or fall. I think Adolescence is quite well situated to endure for a long time. The merits of the work far surpass all the momentary political concerns that have been packed around it. It's a hard thing to watch, but if you have the fortitude for it, it might be worth checking out. But maybe not right now. Maybe you should wait a few years until all the hubbub dies down, and you can enjoy Adolescence for what it actually is, rather than what the politics of the moment want you to think it is. If you've watched Adolescence, and let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I will talk to you later.